Everybody's here. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Otherwise I can get a louder voice, as my wife tells me to do most of the time. So, tonight's forum will feature the candidates from two races, Wisconsin's 14th Senate District and the 42nd Assembly District. These four candidates will appear on the November 8th, not the 28th, general election ballot in their respective districts. I'm Larry Becker. I am a director and the vice chair of the Adams-Columbia Board, and we are sponsoring tonight's program. On behalf of all of our employees, our board of directors, and our 36,000 members, I want to thank you for attending tonight's forum. The planned portion of tonight's forum is expected to last no more than 90 minutes. Following opening introductions, I will ask a series of questions from a predetermined list that is provided to the candidates in advance. It is possible that we won't get through all 10 questions, and I will make the choice which ones we ask. Each candidate will be given a maximum of 3 minutes for each response, and at the end, each candidate will have 3 minutes for closing. So I'll have opening and closing and all the questions we can get through. Then afterwards, the candidates will go to their respective corners, and you'll be allowed, and hopefully you will speak to the different candidates that you wish to ask more questions on a personal nature. So let's get started. Introductions. We'll start from my left, moving to my right. Our first is George Ferreter. You want to give your 3-minute opening speech?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Adams-Columbia Electric Cooperative for hosting this event, and for all of you who are here tonight for turning out. My name is George Ferreter, and I'm a candidate for State Assembly in District 42. I'll give you a little bit of background, since many of you don't know me. I come from a military family. I was born on a military base. My father was a career Navy man. My grandfather was also a career Army man, and my great-grandfather served in the U.S. Army as well. I am, by education and background, a mechanical engineer, but I've also served 8 years active duty, beginning back in 1971, which I followed up with 18 years in the Reserves and National Guard, finishing up here in the Wisconsin Air National Guard a few years back. My civilian career as an engineer was spent building big diesel engines in Beloit, Wisconsin at Fairbanks Morse Engine, a good long history Wisconsin manufacturing company. More recently, I've been called to serve. I am currently on the village board in Doylestown, and that's after having served 2 terms as village president in Doylestown. I'm also an elected delegate to the Wisconsin Conservation Congress, and I sit on the board of Northwoods, which is a private nonprofit sheltered workshop here in Portage. So, why am I running? I'm running because I have skills and abilities that will serve the state of Wisconsin at this point in time, and I hope to be able to convince enough voters to send me to Madison so that I can exercise those skills and abilities for the state that I love dearly. Again, thank you all for coming here tonight, and hopefully we'll have an engaging forum.
Thank you, George. Our next respondent is Keith Ripp, the incumbent from the 42nd.
Well, thank you, Larry. I also, too, would like to thank the Adams-Columbia Electric Cooperative for having this forum, and also for folks taking time out of their schedule to come out, and stay involved and listen to the things we have to say and share with folks. So for the past 8 years, I've been honored to serve my rural constituents in the 42nd Assembly District, because I have lived here all my life. I was born and raised on my family farm just outside of Lodi, and it is here where I've learned the true value of hard work. Today I'm proud to own and operate the same farm with my wife Lori that we continue to live on and also serve our local community. So over the last 8 years, worked hard with members from both political parties to successfully move Wisconsin forward. Wisconsin now ranks 6th in the nation for wage growth, 3rd in the nation for high school graduation, and by freezing tuition rates and affordable top-notch college education at any of the Wisconsin universities now is more possible for all students. We also have lowered property taxes and have the lowest unemployment rate since 2001. Wisconsin is a better place to live, work, and raise a family. Because of these achievements, but there is still more work to do. Residents of a rural assembly district understand there's unique challenges. Our neighbors, friends struggle with access to quality healthcare professionals, reliable high-speed internet, adequately funded schools, and well-maintained roads. This past session, I joined my fellow rural legislators to organize the Rural Wisconsin Initiative, and that's to focus on these needs in the rural area. Healthcare, education, agriculture, and transportation are very vital to our everyday lives, and I will remain committed to finding solutions to these problems in our rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Our next respondent will be the challenger in the 14th Senate District, Mr. Brian Smith.
Thank you. Again, it'll probably be said a number of times, but we do appreciate that this event is being put on tonight. This is what it's all about, is making sure that people fully understand what you can expect from the different candidates. So again, it's wonderful to see everybody out tonight. My name is Brian Smith. I was born and raised in the city of Waupaca. I graduated from high school in Waupaca, which is in the northern part of the 14th District. I have 9 brothers and sisters. I'm a UW Stevens Point graduate, where I graduated with emphasis in education and accounting. And I am married to my wife Terry, who's in the audience tonight, for 37 wonderful years. We have 3 grown children, and we also have 5 grandchildren that are in the school. My first profession was as a teacher. I was a teacher in the Racine school districts and then also the Waupaca school districts for 11 years, where I was a coach, and I was also the president of the local teachers association. So I had the ability to be someone that negotiated contracts with our school boards, and it was a good experience for me. After 11 years in teaching, I went into business on my own, small business owner in Waupaca. I'm an accountant, and I have 2 accounting firms, one in the city of Waupaca, and we also have a branch office in the city of Manawa, which is just north of Waupaca. I had a partner that joined me about 12 years ago, so we have an accounting firm called Smith & Radke, LLC. We do over 3,500 individual tax returns, so it's a very successful business. My parents owned a small restaurant, or actually it was just a bar when they originally owned that, and they passed away, both of them, about 14 years ago, and 3 of my brothers and I took over the running of that bar and restaurant, and we actually expended quite a bit of money to improve that downtown Main Street business in Waupaca, and made it into a restaurant and a sports bar type setup, and it's been very successful. And not only has it been successful, but it's also helped the downtown area. And more importantly, I am the mayor of the city of Waupaca, and I've been the mayor of the city of Waupaca for 8 terms, or I've been there, this is my 15th year. And quite honestly, that's the reason I'm running, is because I've seen so many things that have happened at the state level that have hurt us at the local level, and that was the most important reason that I decided to run. So, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And our last person is Senator Luther Olson.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to do is thank the Adams Columbia Electric Co-op for having this forum. I was talking to Larry ahead of time, and I think this is the 3rd time I've been here over the last few years. I was born and raised in Berlin. I live in Ripon. I've been a lifelong resident of the 14th Senate District. Before I was elected to the legislature, I was on the Berlin Area School Board for 21 years, 9 of those to be chairman. Some of the things I've done and been involved in since I've been senator, I've been fortunate enough to be the chair of the Senate Education Committee, also vice chair of the Joint Committee on Finance. There are 16 members of us that work on the budget once the governor gives it to us. I've been appointed to the Governor's Council on Financial Literacy, the Education Standards Council, Read to Lead Council. I'm a member of the UW Hospital and Clinic Board of Directors and one of 5 voting members on the Executive Committee. I serve on the Claims Board, and that's the board that people who have claims against the state of Wisconsin come to for us to decide if we should pay or not. I'm on the Wisconsin Education Communication Board, which is responsible for public radio and TV. And I've also been involved in some national organizations. I've been vice chairman of the Education Commission of the States, which is an organization that states belong to dealing with education. And I was fortunate enough to be the co-chair of the National Conference of State Legislators Education Committee for a couple of years. You know, I was thinking about some of the things that I've done over the last 4 years and years before that, and thought, you know, I can tell you what I've done and things like this, but I think to me it means more when other people recognize you for your body of work. In the last few years, I have been recognized by the Grocers Association, National Federation of Independent Business, Guardian of Small Business, the Milwaukee Area Chamber of Commerce, the Wisconsin Counties Association, WMC, the Wisconsin Institute of Healthy Aging, the Wisconsin Builders Association, the School Nutrition Association, Legislator of the Year, the Shining Star for Education Reform, the School Nursing Legislative Award, the School Counselors Association, the Wisconsin Charter School Association, the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation Conservation Legislator of the Year, the State Prosecutors Legislator of the Year, and the State Assessing Officers, Fair and Equitable. So I have tried in my career to be involved in many things and represent the 14th Senate District the best that I can.
Thank you, Luther. We're going to get into the questions. The ground rules for the candidates are that I will do them from a predetermined list. They will be random. We will not use all the questions. We will do it in alternating fashion. Responses are 3 minutes or less. The candidates already know that they're not supposed to interrupt the other people when they're giving their answers. And that's the ground rules for the candidates. Now for you folks, again, there will be no questions from you. I will ask all the questions until we're over with. Regardless of your viewpoints, please be respectful. In the interest of keeping it on the program, please don't applaud anything, and verbal outbursts may require you to leave the room. So we're supposed to run 90 minutes, and then there'll be time afterwards. So the first question that I am going to ask Keith is, what can the state do to keep businesses here in Wisconsin, and especially in the rural areas?
Well, the number one thing probably right now being discussed and thrown out there is broadband. Just recently we have found out that there is, I think, $570 million possibly coming to 3 companies in Wisconsin. And so I think that's going to be important. Small businesses are basically the backbone of our economy here in Wisconsin and stuff. And so broadband is number one. I think with communications, internet service, even in my part of the northwest part of Dane County, there's areas and pockets that don't have service. So that's important. Number two thing, I would think infrastructure is very important on our roads and highways. Some people feel that because I chair transportation, I write the check and approve projects. Well, I don't. I wish I had that authority some days. So working with colleagues to build consensus of what we can get done as far as improving our infrastructure, getting things up to speed. Transportation is probably the key when we look at agriculture, tourism, manufacturing. I mean, that's what drives our state and drives our economy. So the thing that binds everything together is our infrastructure and stuff. And so we've got to have our good roads. We've written a letter to the governor, invited him out to go on a tour with us. We've been on several towns on their road tours. County, I've been involved with them a couple times. Just recently, I think today, the Highway 33 project is getting an overlay and a stretch. We've been after DOT on that for a while, so that's happening, which is good. Being in the trucking industry, I recognize and realize that we've got to have good infrastructure. I just soon pay on the front end a little more than be paying on repair bills and things like that. So.
Thank you, Keith. George, the same question. What can the state do to keep businesses here in Wisconsin, and especially in rural areas?
Thank you. As I prepared for this forum, I promised myself that I would speak from the heart and based upon my knowledge and experience. My experience as a veteran, my experience as an engineer, and my experience as a local community leader. And all of these things really speak to each one of the questions that I'll be dealing with tonight. But this one is of particular interest to me. I live in the heart of Columbia County. Columbia County is profoundly rural, as is most of the rest of District 42. And I would agree with my opponent in that broadband access and infrastructure are important to ensuring that businesses remain in our rural areas, and important to every citizen in the rural areas as well. We can't function as a society, and our businesses can't function as commercial enterprises without good roads to travel on. And as we emerge into the 21st century, access to broadband is very important for businesses at all levels. So as a legislator, I would promise to advance both initiatives to restore our roads, to maintain our roads, and to improve our roads, as well as to bring rural broadband to every part of District 42, and in fact to every part of Wisconsin. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about rural broadband some more during this program. I have some specific ideas associated with rural broadband. But I'd also like to talk about regional and local economic initiatives. I recently had the occasion to be at a Rio Community Club dinner, and our keynote speaker was from MADREP, which was the Madison Regional Economic Group. And it became pretty clear in listening to him talk that there are some great opportunities out there for individuals and for businesses to work with our regional economic activities to better formulate their businesses, to advance their businesses, and to keep their businesses located rurally, which is so very important in terms of maintaining our communities and keeping our children close to home with good, high-paying jobs and economic opportunities that can pave the way into the future. So we're going to hear a lot of terms like clustering, convergence, synchronicity, and synergy. Those are all buzzwords. They're used by these organizations, but they all are important. And I think they're important to remember as we carry on a discussion about how to improve our economy locally. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Luther, Same question, what can the state do to keep businesses here in Wisconsin, especially rural areas?
Well, I think one of the things that businesses look at is the business-friendly environment, and some of those things that are included in that are reasonable taxes. If you look at and see what's going on in other states, they're all competing to draw businesses from each other, which is unfortunately sad. I watch TV and they say, one of the commercials for New York State is saying, come to our state, there's no taxes for the first 10 years you're here. We have to have common sense regulation. We have to have regulation on businesses, but it has to be common sense and fairly enforced across the state. We have to have competitive electric rates, and we're here with the Adams Company Electric Co-op, but there's an article the other day in the Journal Sentinel where businesses were saying, you know what, our electric rates are higher in Wisconsin than they are in other states, and we used to be one of the lowest states for rates, but we are no longer. That is not the case. We have to have good roads because a lot of things move by truck on highways. We have to have a good rail system because a lot of things move by rail. That's important. Infrastructure, as you heard people talking about broadband. So many things now happen on the internet. Probably the thing that really I think is the biggest issue, and I don't have the answer for this one, is a workforce. I hear businesses that have jobs at the entry level to the high-end skilled level cannot find employees. The 14th Senate District includes Wisconsin Dells, and I talked to folks over there, and they can't find housekeepers. They can't find workers. I talked to people who have high-end manufacturing. They cannot find folks who work. So we have to make sure that they're trained and they have people. And I don't know how we get more people in the state of Wisconsin, but we have to make sure that the folks who want to work, we make sure that people do want to work and that there's no incentive for not working can get jobs. I think another thing is a positive attitude and local leadership, healthy economic development at the local level. But when I say positive attitude, unfortunately, sometimes when a business wants to come into a community, there's all these people who say, no, we don't want this, we don't want that. It doesn't take long for a business to say, well, if I'm not welcome here, I'm not coming here. And if a business wants to expand, we have to make sure that they do it in a proper way, but we have to protect our environment. But I think a positive attitude probably goes a long way in a lot of things, and of course, job training.
Thank you, Luther. Next question. We are an electric.
Wait.
Oh, Brian's got it.
Thank you all. Brian, sorry I missed
I was
that.
thinking I just wasted my.
I apologize. Brian, the same question. What can the state do to keep businesses here in Wisconsin, especially rural areas?
Thank you. Great question, actually, for a mayor of a small community in the 14th Senate District, because there are many things that I think we could do to help our communities and things that we shouldn't be doing to help our communities at the state level. First and foremost, we do need, as long as that's on the top of the list here, and we're here tonight, we need to get high-speed internet. There's no doubt about that, and I have a story about that too, and hopefully I'll be able to answer that a little bit later on how the city of Waupaca handled the concerns about high-speed internet and was able to do that with businesses and local government together. We obviously need to keep our utilities costs down. I read the same article where we are the highest paid or the highest cost utility in the central states. So we need to work on that. But I heard my opponent talk about good pay, about the issues that we have with hiring people here. Quite honestly, we need to treat our people in our state fairly. We need to pay them well and give them good benefits. We don't need to turn back the clock and make sure that people are making less money now than they did pre-2011 and have less benefits. We need to make people want to stay in Waupaca because in Wisconsin, in the 14th district, because it's not the weather, the reason that we stay here. There's got to be many other reasons why we stay here too. You know, just a sidebar on this too, you know, we don't need to pass tax credits to the 11 most wealthiest people in the state of Wisconsin when we have projects that really need to be done within our community. And I'll tell you, the best thing that the state of Wisconsin can do for small communities in rural areas, townships, villages, school districts, is get rid of the tax levy limit. Let the locals decide what's best for their community. Just to give you an example, just in the city of Waupaca, because I know that best, you just talk about transportation aids alone. In 2008, the city of Waupaca had over $1 million in transportation aids that we used just for our city funds. We are now at $391,000 in 2016, but we have levy limits. We have net new construction at less than 1%. But we're supposed to maintain our services. We're supposed to be able to help with startup costs of businesses in our community. We can't. The state is choking our ability to do that.
Thank you, Brian. I got all four of you. Next question. We are in a utility. We are a cooperative. We have a number of members' concerns on this question, but what is your particular view of renewable energy and how do we handle it? And we'll start with George.
Thank you. This is a great question. I mentioned that I worked for many years as an engineer at Fairbanks, Morse Engine and Beloit building diesel engines. Before that, I worked at a power plant. I was party to the completion and startup and operation of a nuclear power plant in central Illinois, and I've had an eye to energy ever since. All energy resources must be explored and viable resources advanced. And by viable, what I mean is technologically viable and commercially viable. What can work technologically may not in fact be practical, at least at this point in time. So ideally, both terms apply to energy sources that we use. They're technologically good and sound and commercially good and sound. I'd add to that extracted resources are finite. Whatever you're getting out of the ground is eventually going to be exhausted. And although extracted technologies are important to us right now in terms of energy production for long-term sustainability, we need to look to renewable sources of energy. We also need to develop renewable sources of energy to ensure that our overall energy portfolio keeps us moving in a direction towards energy independence, which is important to us as a nation. So renewable energy is integral to becoming energy independent. As you know, oil and natural gas are commodities that are traded on a global scale. But wind and solar, for example, are immediately applied to the grid. Now, those two technologies may offer economic challenges right now, but we shouldn't set them aside. And Wisconsin, some number of years ago, began paving the way with the creation of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is a framework for energy providers to ensure that renewables are at least a piece of the overall energy pie. So that is important. I think that for a cooperative like Adams Columbia, it's important to have energy sources available that are economically reasonable. And we know that our power grid right now is to some extent powered by baseload power plants that are burning coal or nuclear power or natural gas. So we need to take advantage of those resources as they are economically important to us. But let's not drop the ball on renewables. We have wonderful wind farms here in Columbia County. We've got two ethanol plants that I'm aware of in Columbia County. Those are all parts of the energy pie, and it behooves us as citizens to keep that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Keith, same question. What is your view on renewable energy in its place?
Well, I think in the 42nd Assembly District, we're very fortunate to, I think, have one of the areas that produces the most renewable energy in the state, probably. As my opponent mentioned, we have 2 ethanol plants and a wind farm. Renewable energies are part of the future in the energy industry. We need to keep moving technology forward. It needs to be developed further. We have to also keep advancing to the next generation to move these, to move projects forward, whether it's wind, solar, or any of those. Right now, they are not really feasible. Wind energy, for example, we have to figure out a way how to store that energy when the wind's blowing. Generally, middle of summer, 90 degrees, the wind's not blowing. That's when the peak and demand is at the highest. Everybody's got their air conditioners on and stuff. So we need to have also efficient, transferable, and reliable energy at all times. And so that's where part of our problem lies, is with some of the renewables. If the wind's not blowing, it's not producing energy. I guess from the cooperative side, I think you've got the ability as members of a cooperative to participate in these projects if they're not feasible for you as an individual. There's usually wind projects and also solar projects that are out there. Sometimes they'll go to a solar farm, for instance, and I think they're always looking for investors or people that want to participate. So your cooperative or you as individuals can participate as a cooperative member at some level and think or know that you are doing your part to participate and use and produce renewable energy.
Thank you, Keith. Brian, same question. What is your view on renewable energy?
Thank you. Wisconsin has seen some great successes in our rural cooperatives using their unique footprints to expand wind, solar, hydro, biogas, and biomass resources. There's also the potential to grow economies across the state and bring jobs to rural areas. One of the best ones is actually by the Adams Columbia Electric's co-op, which I just found out a little bit more about, but they have a program called Renew Now, which shows the success of solar and wind in the co-op models. Co-ops are more nimble and more responsive to customers, which we see in the popularity of this program. Wind and solar are the 2 most reliable clean energy sources, and they can be used to boost revenues not only for Wisconsin farmers, but also for the renewable energy manufacturing industry. And we do know that we have an industry within Wisconsin that is actually helping us with the wind, and it actually builds the basis for those wind energy that we have. There was a recent study that I came across that showed that 10 states that rely the most on renewable energy, their average kilowatt price was $9.79 per kilowatt, and this was back in 2013. The 10 states that use the least amount of renewable energy actually were at $10.28. So that's 60 cents difference by just using renewable energy. It's a huge reason why we need to continue down that path where we look at using renewable energy. Obviously, the cost up front can be greater, but you can see the result when you look at the study that was done. And let's not forget that there are 25,000 clean energy workers in the state of Wisconsin. What another reason to be able to use that. Those are good paying jobs with good benefits, and let's continue that. And not only that, but U.S. wind farms pay, and this is U.S.-wide, $222 million a year to farming families and other rural landowners as rent and lease. And normally these are paid to people that are in low income areas. So It's another way of supplementing their income when the farm income is down. So again, these are all great things to have renewable energy on our side in this state.
Works much better when we go in a row. But- Luther, you are the finalist on what is your view of renewable energy?
Well, I think that in Wisconsin or any state, you need a portfolio of energy sources. You know, we can use wind, solar, hydro, coal, natural gas, nuclear. One area is not the answer. And I think government has a place to play in helping develop new energy sources, because a lot of times there's a lot of research and work and money that it's going to take to get things really going. One of the concerns I believe is it's not real smart to mandate too high renewables, because the problem is the mandate really probably gets ahead of the production and the scientific ability to use renewables. And renewables also have to be reliable. I mean, you guys at Adams Columbia Electric Co-op, when people turn their switch on, they expect the light to turn on, the air conditioner to work. And you can't have sources of energy that, I'm sorry, it's not working today. But I think technology is going to really help that along. Another answer to this energy problem, along with renewable, is using electricity efficiently. Because the focus on energy is one of those programs that is designed to help people who want to use electricity more efficiently. And the other question, and you heard this, some of my colleagues say, that electricity has to be cost efficient. As I said before, we just can't say, well, we're going to do renewable energy and whatever the cost is, because that really affects manufacturing and people's use of it. I was down at the open house, the groundbreaking at the power plant just south of town the other day, and one of the things that was really interesting is they have spent, I don't know, probably in the last 5 or 6 years, $1 billion, just about $1 billion on technology to clean up their, I won't say pollution, but their smoke and ash and all those kind of things that are coming out of their stacks. $1 billion. Now that $1 billion doesn't buy any more electricity, but it does make our environment much cleaner. And so we have to make sure that if we are using coal or things like that, we do it in an environmentally friendly way. Otherwise, really, what's the point? Because we're maybe having cheap energy, but polluting our environment, and that doesn't work either. And when I talk to people in the power generation field, they are very environmentally conscious.
Thank you. Thank you, Luther. Our next question, and we will start with Keith on this one. What are your legislative priorities, and what issues are of particular interest to you?
The legislative priorities, primarily, as we've talked about a little bit, transportation issues, broadband issues. Something else that we've done in the Assembly also is develop the Wisconsin Rural Initiative Program. And in that is rural education, rural health care, rural technology needs, broadband expansion is included in that. And then also rural workforce development. Certainly transportation fund and providing more resources to our local communities. Those are all things that are needed to advance the economy in Wisconsin here and in our small towns, villages, municipalities. Also part of that with, as I mentioned earlier, we need to find with some of our rural school districts are having to go to referendum at this time for operating budgets. And I think that's something that has gotten our attention over the years. A number of us have talked about this And since I've been there, we've had over 70% turnover. And so that's finally slowed down a little bit, so we are able to build a consensus with some of my colleagues. And I think finding a solution, whether it's changing the funding formula or looking at finding general revenue dollars in the budget to go to our rural schools to help solve this problem, because they shouldn't have to be passing operating referendums every 3 years. If it's to build something or improve, that's one thing, but operating it is something that really gets our attention and needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Keith. George, same question. What are your legislative priorities and what issues are of particular interest to you?
Thank you. My priority is first and foremost to serve the citizens of District 42 and the state of Wisconsin. We have clear and immediate challenges, as we are hearing about tonight. Providing proper roads, good quality schools, clean water for our citizens, either in the residential wells or in municipal water supplies, veterans care, and in preserving local control. These are all legislative challenges that I would attend to as a legislator. Having visited most of the township and village boards during the course of this campaign, it's become clear that the greatest concern at the local government level does involve transportation infrastructure. We need to fix this, and we need to fix it in a complete and sustainable manner. And I have a plan that will address that and do it without unfair taxation. So those things are legislative priorities. But we have broader challenges here in Wisconsin, and they're challenges to our governance and to our democracy in the state. And the foremost challenge is redistricting reform. It's an overarching problem. Citizens of both parties are affected by this, packed into districts where their individual voice and their individual vote has been diluted. And that quite simply is not right. It stifles debate, it stifles discussion, and it inhibits the back and forth exchange of ideas and policies that are absolutely essential for a representative democracy to function. So I would, of necessity, include that as a legislative priority. We don't need the Iowa plan, but we do need to look at the Iowa plan. What we need is the Wisconsin plan, which will take the best elements of every other redistricting plan in this country and make it the absolute model for the rest of the country to use. And I can promise you that I would pursue that. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Brian, we'll go with you. Luther's got it. We'll stay with that one. Okay.
That's all right. That's all right. My legislative priorities for this next year. I have been lucky enough, as I mentioned, to be on the Joint Committee on Finance for a number of years. And so the only bill that ever really has to pass the legislature is the budget. And that, if you're on that committee, it's months of work and hearings across the state, much time spent on reading and trying to take what the governor gives us and take that budget and change it so that we can get enough votes to pass it out of the legislature. And we deal with issues from education to transportation to health care to prisons, university, whatever you want to, the state does is involved in that budget. And so that's my number one priority. But probably the second one is dealing with education, because as I mentioned, I chair the education committee. And we have issues dealing with funding and the teacher shortage that not only Wisconsin has, but every state in the country has, and making sure that our boys and girls are prepared to compete for the jobs in the 21st century with other states and countries. Also in education, the federal government changed its No Child Left Behind to Every Student Success Act, which gives power back to the state, which the feds never should have taken from us. And it gives us power and authority over education. And so I want to work with that in making sure that we have a plan so that we can have the quality education that our boys and girls need. Healthcare is another issue. MA, keeping our medical assistance costs under control. In the medical assistance area and personal care workers, we have a serious shortage of workers. We've got to figure out how do we fund so that we have people to take care of people. That is a serious issue. And the big one, the elephant in the room, is transportation. We've got to figure out how do we come up with a reliable source, sustainable source of revenue to take care of our roads. Years ago, because of serious political pressure, we got rid of the indexing law, and that has cut our revenue for the state transportation budget. We used to take money out of the transportation budget and use it to general purpose revenue expenditures. Now we have a constitutional amendment that doesn't allow that, but we have to come up with a source because, vehicles get better mileage. I mean, every time you buy a car, you get more miles to the gallon, and so you're paying less in user fee for paying for the roads, cars and semis and everything. So we've got to really deal with that.
And Brian, again, the same question. What is your legislative priorities and what issues are of particular interest to you?
Thank you. And as I say these are in no particular order, but there are a number of items that I feel that we need to look at and do something almost immediately on what's going on. And again, as the mayor of City Wolfpack, and knowing what's happened since 2011, the most important thing as the mayor is to bring the local control back to our communities. Let the constituents decide what's best for our community. I'm the one that's in the community. I'm the one that has public meetings. I'm the one that has open office hours twice a week within my community, and I'm able to talk to constituents. I'm the one that's walking down the streets within my community and hopefully within my district in talking to people about what needs to be done most in the local economy. Education. As a former teacher of 11 years, have 3 adult children, 5 grandchildren that are now running through that. It's so important for us to fund education. Whoever came up with a crazy idea that we can fund 2 school systems within the state of Wisconsin, we need to figure that out in a hurry, because we cannot afford public and private schooling in our state. College and tech schools, as I said before, I'm one of 10 children in my family. I was the first, I'm number 5 in the family. I was the first one to go to school, to post-high school. And I'm very proud of that I was able to do that, and some of my siblings were be able to follow. But we didn't, it wasn't easy, obviously, and by cutting the amount of funding that's going to our state programs is hurting it for the poor people and the people that are not as well off to be able to go to school. Everybody deserves schooling of some kind. I'm not saying you shouldn't pay for it. You should pay for your schooling. That is important to us. But I do think it's important not only for college and tech schools, and let's find a way to refinance student loans. Really, people? I mean, I'm an accountant and I can figure it out and I can help it. I mean, that's something I can do. I'm not going to get very far here, I guess, with 1 minute left, but because there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. Transportation is a huge issue, obviously. They're cutting our throats at the local level. As I told you before, we went from $1 million to under $400,000 on just our local roads. Doesn't matter how much we've lost at the state level on our state roads. I've traveled all over this state, especially in the 14th district, and I'm telling you, my truck needs new roads. There's no doubt about it. Jobs. Let's not forget how important it is for us to be proud of all of our employees in the state of Wisconsin, whether they're private employees or public employees. Give them the right to organize if they want. Remember that prevailing wage is something that the industry works together on to come up with a good idea, and I'll stop there.
They're getting very well trained here. As we've been going through this, they have come on to some themes, all four of them, on some of the different questions I have, so it's proving somewhat challenging. But one of the things that they keep bringing up is our roads. So the question is, there's a need for more funding to rebuild our roads. What are some of your ideas on how to address this issue? And I thought about skipping this, but I think they all have more ideas than they have given us so far, and it is a very important question. So, if I remember right, it is George's turn to start off.
Well, thank you, and I'm glad you pointed out that this is a recurrent theme. I went to the Turnout for Transportation meeting here in Columbia County a couple of weeks ago now. Great meeting. They were held in every county across the state on the same evening, and I'm sure that there was a common thread. I know that there was a common theme here in Columbia County, and everybody was on the same page in acknowledging that we have a huge problem before us that involves the condition of our roads. Where the conversation diverged into many different directions was how we are going to fix that. As you know, we as a state voted to amend the state constitution to create the transportation fund as a segregated or protected fund, which is wonderful, but if it's chronically underfunded, we still have a challenge. And the need to ensure that we identify and or create a sustainable funding stream that matches the magnitude of the expenditures we need to make to, one, restore our roads, and two, maintain our roads is in fact our challenge. I believe that first of all, we need to do two things in parallel. We need to take all available existing resources and begin immediately to fix our roads. And that means best utilizing the existing revenue pie, if you will, to ensure that it's distributed fairly between urban and rural areas so that our local roads, our county roads, our state roads, and our greatest highways are all treated with some degree of equality. We need to take our existing resources, perhaps even including the rainy day fund, and put those dollars to work fixing the roads. We need to, in parallel to that, identify all available investment streams and perhaps create new ones. Now, we hear a lot about indexing the gasoline tax, but we also understand that fuel economies and the advance of hybrid and electric cars render the use of that in terms of a sustainable resource questionable. User fees, even tolling, all of these need to be considered. Perhaps something new and different. I've heard it said on the campaign trail that maybe we should look at something like, as I've heard it described, a six-pack tax, where a small levy would be put on a six-pack of beer that could be applied directly to the transportation fund. Those two things may seem to be at odds with one another, but we know that the problem needs to be fixed, and it has to be fixed now. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Keith?
Well, certainly passing any funding solution to fix our roads takes a consensus, and that's something I've been working on probably for the last 4 years now. Like I said, we had it's over 70% turnover in the legislature, and so it takes a while again to get everybody up to speed. Sitting down with them, talking to them, again emphasizing how important the transportation is to manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. probably about 4 years ago, I was the one that introduced the bill to amend the Constitution, take that very serious, changing the Constitution. And so we did. We were able to keep transportation funding in transportation now. Previously, the previous administration rated $1.3 billion, and it was a timing issue when we should have been starting to rebuild our roads and infrastructure. And so it was the worst timing of all. And so that again plays into it, basically creating a perfect storm. Crafting policy is not easy either. There's no one size fits any of the solutions. Right now we hear, I would say the Republicans are taking a lot of heat for not getting something done. 2008, the Democrats also controlled both houses, and they couldn't get any legislation passed for improving our infrastructure. I've done letters to the governor and also basically all funding options to be on the table, because not one solution is going to fix the issue. We need to look at several different things, whether it's early this winter we're going to have an audit, information out from the DOT. There could be some savings there. We don't know what that number is yet. Beyond that, it's also looking at how does DOT perform their jobs. One example would be replacing an intersection. They may come in and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineering this intersection or any project, and the project may or may never happen. So that is something that has to be talked about, looked at. Two key goals, I would say, is as a business owner too. Let's have a short-term plan and a long-term plan. And then also, last but not least, we have to ensure that the least amount of financial impact on Wisconsin families, because our residents are already taxed very heavily. This was also a major issue in the last budget. I did not vote for the last budget because we did not address transportation problems. And recently, I think it was this last week, the governor has moved his position a little bit. He had $9 million slated for transportation road aids, and now has moved to $23 million. So I think he is listening and feeling some of the pressure.
Thank you, Keith. Brian, same question to you. There is a need for more funding to build our roads. What are some of your ideas on how to address the issue?
First and foremost, and actually I've gotten this from reading and listening to the Senate Majority Leader, and he first of all said we need to make sure that our government, the DOT, is running more efficiently. And that's the first point that we should look at. Why they haven't decided to do this earlier, I'm not sure, but it's very important. These are obvious things that as a small business owner I would look at. I would make sure that the DOT has a complete list and an updated list of all the infrastructure needs that we have throughout the state that they are concerned about. And then let's prioritize those items. Let's not use political reasons to decide which projects you're going to do. Let's make sure that we prioritize that and discuss the priorities of those. Hey, and let's make sure the local governments get their money back so that they can take care of their transportation needs and don't need the state to decide that for us. And we just need to bring those back to pre-2011 levels, and I think that will help us a lot at the local level. Again, fuel tax, we've talked about it, gas tax. I like to call it a user fee because it truly is a user fee. People that use the roads are actually paying for that. And I think Mr. Ripp had said, and George both talked about if we would have continued to index that, the current rate is 30.9 cents. If we would have continued to index from 2006, we would be at 37.9 cents. This is a bipartisan issue, and I don't disagree with that it is an issue that that should have been fixed as we move forward here. So We need to look at that. Just did a little bit of simple math and why I think the gas tax will be an immediate help to us, quite honestly. If you drive an average of 10,000 miles in the state of Wisconsin and you get 20 miles to the gallon, okay, it would cost you $5 in 1 year to increase the amount that can be used for transportation to almost $65 million. So that would increase it. That's $5, okay? Now, nobody wants to increase taxes, but I agree. And then we also need to look at vehicle registration fees, make sure that our hybrid and our electric vehicles also are paying their fair share, because they are putting wear and tear on our roads, even though they are helping our environment too.
Thank you, Brian. Luther, you get to finish this up.
Well, as you've heard all night, this is probably the elephant in the room that we have to deal with. And I remember when I first got elected to the Assembly, at that time Governor Thompson wanted to do a franchise fee, raise the gas tax, and the Assembly didn't, and the Senate said yes. And we wound up pulling the transportation budget out of the regular budget and didn't pass it until, I don't know, October of that year. So anytime you are wanting to raise gas taxes or user fees, as I really think the right word is, it is very, very difficult. Let's not kid ourselves. It is a tough job. I think one of the things that Keith brought up is this audit that we're looking at coming out with, talking about, you know, is the department as efficient as it could be? Are we building roads that will last? I mean, if you look at, I was up in Canada, I mean, their roads seem to last forever. Now, there's got to be a reason. And I didn't see potholes all over and things like that. So we have to look at what are we building and how are we building it? Are we building it to last, or is it just, you know, getting by the cheapest and then all of a sudden we've got to do it over and over again? The question was, how do you fund this? There's two ways to fund it, really. You can either raise user fees or borrow money. And it both get spent. The problem is, if you borrow it, somebody's got to pay it later, and your interest goes up and up and up. Right now, we're a little better than 20%. So in other words, every dollar we bring in, a little better than 20 cents goes back to pay debt service. You need to borrow some money because we're building bridges and things that'll last a long time that the next generation is going to use, but we shouldn't make them pay for everything that we're going to use right now. I'm not really so hot on license fees and car registrations. I guess the gas tax, and we'll call it a gas tax, much more politically correct to use it a user fee, but if you look at where that money comes from, the gas tax, 20% of our gas tax comes from people outside of our state. Why would we not do something that lets them, you know, pay a nickel for every dollar that we spend? I think that's an important area that we need to look at also, to making sure that if you use it, you pay. I used to use the example of my mother, who didn't pass away now, but she probably drove 1,000 miles a year, and I drove, I don't know how many thousand miles a year. I should pay more for the roads than she should, and I don't really believe that we should have a real high car license fee, because that's really not fair to people who don't drive, but those of us who drive a lot should pay.
Thank you. Well, now I'm at a quandary. I had 10 questions, we've made it through 4. About one more question is going to do it. So hopefully, they've already considered all 10, and in their closing, they will cover a few of them. But what I'm asking right now is that, guys, questions 7 and 8, I'm probably going to combine a little bit. And so what the question is how will you determine what impact new legislation will have on consumers? And what are the best ways for constituents to alert you on important issues and make them understand? And I think it's a joint question. It's important in how our legislators, our elected legislators, communicate with their constituents. And so handle this the best you can, but we'll start with Keith.
So, impact on new legislation. Well, as a citizen legislator, we generally listen and take input from people in the district because the answers aren't always in Madison. They're generally, I think, out at the kitchen table as kitchen table issues. Combine them. So the best way for constituents to alert or be in touch with us. Generally, my door is always open to constituents. People pop in and out during the day at different times. And then also, some of the best legislation comes from people that are active, development communities, emails, phone calls, setting up meetings. I visit with people out in the district all the time, generally because parking is a lot of times an issue downtown Madison. And there's a number of things that bills and legislation that we have done. I think in 2 sessions ago, I probably had did the most bills almost in our House in the Assembly. Things I hear at the door from people, they support me because I get things done. Guess that's all I've got on that one, on those two. So.
Okay. George, how would you answer that set of questions?
Thank you. So laws affect consumers both directly and indirectly. Directly, if taxes are increased or if there's an additional burden directly placed upon suppliers in terms of quality standards. But there's also indirect costs that eventually will show up at the consumer level if it's more expensive for business to keep track of paperwork and that sort of thing. And ideally, legislators pay attention to that before the laws are enacted. But there are ways to assess the impacts. Ahead of time, there can be studies. And afterwards, and this ties in with question number 8, there is the always necessary interaction between the legislator and his constituency. So there is no substitute for direct personal contact between an elected representative at any level and the constituents. As an elected village leader, I've always been more than happy to engage the village folk either on the phone, could go to their house, meet somewhere, oftentimes at the scene of the problem that's emergent. And that can be expanded to the state level as well. Certainly an open door policy, town hall meetings, an open willingness to attend village and town board meetings on the side of the legislator are all necessary means of contact. And if there are impacts from the constituency in terms of additional cost burdens that are being created by laws that are passing, that's the best way for a legislator to learn about it, other than hopefully doing his homework before the laws are passed that are going to impact people. So both things are important. A considered study in advance in understanding all aspects of an issue before it's legislated. If there's economic impacts, they need to be identified. And then in the larger sense, every legislator should be always willing to communicate with the constituents. And this is the 21st century. We not only have telephones, we have the internet, we have email, we can have virtual town hall meetings, we can Skype. There's all sorts of ways that a legislator can communicate with the constituent. And I could promise you, as an elected official, I would pursue what I do locally right now, always be available to each voter. Thank you.
Thank you. Luther, it's your turn. Again, reiteration here. How do you determine what impact any new legislation would have on consumers or on the members of your district? And what are the best ways for the constituents to talk to you about their concerns and what is important to them?
I guess the best way and the way that I use to determine what the impact of the legislation is going to be, not only to consumers but to my constituents, is try to educate myself on the issue. And that's a lot of work because we deal with so many things in the legislature, there's bills that come up, and so you have to talk to people, you have to, well, I think one thing that helps me is I've lived life, I know what it's like, I'm a citizen legislator, but you have to educate yourself, ask tough questions about what is this going to do, how is it going to affect people, and honestly, you can never really totally understand what's going to happen. But if you have the best resources, you can at least try not to make so many mistakes. One of the things I always remember is the federal government a number of years ago wanted to tax luxury boats because they thought if you can buy a luxury boat, you should pay a huge tax. Well, they put this tax in place, and we had companies that built luxury boats. Well, guess what? Folks didn't buy them, so all the people that worked in those places got laid off. It didn't take long for that to change because they said, well, we passed this law, we thought we were going to get this money, we're not getting any money because nobody's buying boats, but the people that worked there got laid off. What's the best way to alert us about issues? Any way possible. We have email now, and we get hundreds of emails all the time. We used to get a lot of letters, mostly it's emails, phone calls, face-to-face. I know that when my wife and I go to the grocery store, we usually start out together, but we don't finish together because people talk to me in the grocery store, and she finishes the shopping and tries to meet me at the checkout thing because it's an ability for people to see you. I'm out and about all the time, but anything in any way is a good way to talk to your legislator about issues, and it really helps if you know what you're talking about and are up to speed on what the issue is at the present time. One of the things, and I'll be real blunt, the things that are probably the least effective is form letters, because you get these form letters and you sign your name on the bottom and we get 100 that say the same thing. I want to know what you think. I want to know how it is going to affect you to help me make the decision either to support it or, more importantly, change it so that it solves some of those problems. Because, as legislators, we know this much about this much. And so we have to make decisions that a lot of times the only way we can make educated decisions is to listen to folks and have a good source of folks that can give us good information. And it takes a while to develop that.
Thank you, Luther. Brian, finish us up on this one.
Sure. First and foremost, I live in the 14th district. I've lived there almost my entire life. So, what constituents have to say to me, I've lived those, I've done those things, and so obviously I want to talk to the constituents within my district, most importantly, but I also need to expand on that, quite honestly, because a constituent might tell you something and you might act on it and find out that that really didn't work. And here's a perfect example of that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to local control and levy limits, but this is important to use as an example. But I've heard a number of times why there are levy limits in our state, and it's because the constituents said we are paying too much taxes in our state, so we need levy limits. So, okay, let's pass levy limits, let's choke our local economy, but we forgot to ask the most important question when the constituents said, hey, let's not raise our taxes. Okay, what do you want to do without? What services do you have within your community that you no longer need? Are you okay with your roads not being plowed for a week? Are you okay with having libraries that are reduced in size? Are you okay with a reduced police force? No, you're not. So obviously you have to look into it completely to decide what's best. You've got to have a good relationship with local governments. I'm the mayor of the city of Waupaca. I am the president of the Small Cities Association that encompasses a number of states within the 14th district. I hold office hours twice a week, which are open office hours. And I would like to continue that within the district. A good friend of mine who's from Clintonville, her name is Jean Huntermark, who was in the Assembly District in the 40th District. Once a month as mayor, I got to see her in City Hall. And we sat down, and I got to tell you, most of the time we talked about root beer, you know, because she owned a root beer A&W station in Clintonville. And I asked her, how come you come here? And she goes, because if I get one person that comes in here and gives me an idea or tells me what to think, it was worth it for me to come there. And I don't see that from our current Assembly of Legislative people, where they're out there making sure. And snail mail, emails, text, and phone calls. The reason I like emails and text, I love to follow them up with phone calls, but the reasons I love emails and text and snail mail, the regular mail, is we got it in writing, what you are concerned about. And that way I can follow up the question, because I know what you're concerned about. It's not just over the phone where you can misunderstand what you're asking for. And then most importantly, going back, let's make sure we do our research to make sure that it's best, not just for me, not just for the 14th District, but for the state of Wisconsin. That's what's most important.
Thank you. This ends the questions. We will finish up with each candidate having a closing discussion of 3 minutes, and then I'll have a finished part, and then you will have an opportunity to talk to them individually. So, we will start with George.
Thank you. So I'm gonna take the opportunity in my closing remarks actually to answer question number 10 as provided to us, which was, what motivated you to seek public service? I started out this evening by telling you a little bit about myself. I come from a military family. My grandfather was an Army career man. My father was a career Navy man. I've served myself 8 years active, beginning during the war in Vietnam, followed that up with quite a bit of Guard and Reserve time, and my son currently serves in the Wisconsin Air National Guard, a veteran of deployments to Afghanistan and Kyrgyzstan. So I come from a family where service and the sacrifices associated with service were an expectation. It was a part of our way of life. And here in Wisconsin, after a career as an engineer, I saw an opportunity to serve locally at a time when our state was confronted and is confronted with some compelling challenges. We've talked a lot tonight about the condition of our roads. We've talked some about the needs that our school system has. We've talked some about the need for clean water and local control and the need to ensure that the promises made to our veterans are sustained. And all of those things have moved me to public service. First at a local level where I felt I could help our local community at a time when budgets were being cut and state aids were being reduced. But what's important to me most is serving the state of Wisconsin. This is Wisconsin, a place with a proud history of clean government and clean environment. This is the home of the Wisconsin idea and the place where the citizens of the state and the apparatus of the state work together to create many institutions for the public good, including one of the finest university systems in the world. And I cannot sit by as a citizen and see that altered or changed in any way for the worst. So I'm here before you tonight as a candidate for State Assembly in District 42, and I hope to earn enough votes across this district to get elected on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Keith, your turn.
Well, thank you. Again, I'd like to thank Adams Columbia Electric Cooperative for putting this together. And also like to thank the folks for coming out tonight, spending time out of your busy schedules to come out participate. As a third-generation farmer, I learned firsthand the importance of agriculture in Wisconsin. It continues to be one of the Wisconsin's leading industries in the state, contributing an impressive $88 billion to our economy. Also, in addition to my farm, I own and operate a small trucking company. Both of my businesses show me every day how truly vital our state's infrastructure is to Wisconsin's growing economy. There's no greater issue facing the legislature this coming session, than finding a long-term solution to our transportation funding crisis. Problem exists again in large part because of over $1.3 billion has been raided from the transportation fund since 2003. My colleagues and I were able again to pass the constitutional amendment to protect the fund against future raids, but we still have to find a responsible, sustainable plan that will meet our state and local project needs while still ensuring safety and reliability. Continue to work with my constituents, local leaders, businesses, and my colleagues to develop a plan for Wisconsin's future. Proud to be from the rural Wisconsin area. There's no greater privilege than to serve the hardworking citizens of the 42nd Assembly District, and I take great pride in working for you and believe that I am the best candidate to represent you, and I would ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Brian?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to just follow up with just talking about why I'm actually running for the state senate, because that's obviously the most important part. And have I said local control? Because I want to make sure that I say that again. We need to bring back local control. There have been 99 mandates that we have counted that have come down from the state that have harmed just not our local community, but also have harmed our school systems in our counties, and most of those come without funding. And so we have to find the funding for that. We need to see a change of attitude. We need to see a state government and local governments that can get along better together. And we're not getting that. We need to see the state and our employees get along better. Not only the local private employees, but also the public employees. The state's current attitude is not working. It is not working, and it needs to be fixed. Education, obviously, we talked about that, and I just want to touch on one thing and let you think about this for a while. When I became a teacher many years ago, I had 2 opportunities for interviews, 2 within the entire state of Wisconsin. I would have gone anywhere at that time within the state of Wisconsin. I wanted to stay in the state of Wisconsin. I got 2, I got offered 1 job, I took that job. Now, let's move forward to 2016, and now there are teacher shortages in the state of Wisconsin. Why is that? Okay, jobs and economy, we obviously need to raise benefit for all employees, whether you work in the private sector or the public sector. You must make sure that everybody knows that you deserve good pay and good benefits for the job that you do. I want to move down real quick here to why I think I am the person that you should vote for. First of all, I am a proven leader. I've been the mayor of the city of Waupaca for 15 years, re-elected 8 times to the mayor's position. I am a small business owner, and I am the owner of those businesses. I'm the controlling owner of that. I'm an honest individual. When I tell you something, that's the way I'm going to act. I'm not going to vote differently than what I tell you. I'm going to vote the way I tell you that I'm going to. And I'm going to use my knowledge and my experience that I have learned from being a small business owner, a mayor, a former teacher, to make sure that it works well down in the state of Wisconsin. And I will not pass 999 legislation that will ruin our open records law or hurt individuals that have lead paint issues in the city of Milwaukee or other areas around. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Luther, you get to finish this up.
First of all, again, I'd like to thank the Adams Columbia Electric Co-op for this forum. I think these are excellent ways to learn about the candidates who are running for office. I want to tell you that I take the responsibility of your state senator very, very seriously. I remember when I ran the first time years ago, they said, "Oh, Luther, it's a part-time job." Well, it wasn't a part-time job. And it wasn't a full-time job. It's a way of life. You are a senator 24/7, and that's fine. I try and strive to be a statesman, not a political hack, but a statesman that the people of the 14th Senate District can be proud of. As I look at this job, and I've said this in talking to school groups and groups for years, I look at this job as I'm a delegate from the 14th Senate District and a trustee. A delegate is a person who goes to Madison or wherever and knows and made promises and votes the way that people said you should and you would when you got elected. A trustee is a person who looks at issues that the average voter doesn't really ever see or have to deal with, and looks at those and says, okay, what is the right decision? What is the right thing for me to do as a trustee of the 14th Senate District? And you can't be the trustee if you're not the delegate. People have to trust your judgment if you're making the right decisions when you have an opportunity to. As a lifelong resident of the district, I know what being a small business owner is like. I know what education is like, being a former school board member. And just to give you some examples, we had a constituent that came to me with an issue because there was a loophole in the state law where a parent could not be charged for taking sexual abusive pictures of their children. They couldn't be charged. We worked and got that law passed so that that is no longer a loophole. We passed laws and co-authored bills that would make sure victims of child sexual trafficking receive the assistance they need, and calls child sex trafficking what it is, child abuse. We deal with lots of different things in the legislature. One of the things, we talk about passing laws and things like this. A big part of this job is constituent issues, where people call us up and say, we have a problem with the DNR, we have a problem with the Department of Revenue, help us. Sometimes they call us so late that it's very difficult to deal with that. But we take those issues very, very important to help folks maneuver through state government so that they can get a fair shake. Thank you.
Thank you, Luther. I would like all of you to give these four individuals a round of applause. To take the time and to be willing to take the abuse of running for office and potentially being in office, I believe there's great credence to that doing. I'd like to thank all of you for coming here out of your busy schedule. I know for the employees and the board of Adams Columbia, we're glad to do this, but we're really glad when our membership supports it. One more thing, the election is November 8th. You're here. You're already somewhat committed, but please vote. Grab your neighbors if they're still talking to you, and encourage them to vote. This has been certainly an interesting election, and how people are taking it and how they are holding steadfast to their concerns and issues. But this is a democracy. Somebody will win with a majority of the votes, hopefully. We all need to support the winners and communicate with them with what our concerns are so they can do the best job we can. That ends tonight, except for our candidates are going to stay here and talk to you one-on-one if you have specific questions and concerns. So again, thank you for coming.